All right, let's dive into a situation that, believe me, trips up so many people in construction. Picture this. A project's finished, maybe years have gone by, but there are still these annoying defects lingering. And now the contractor wants their final payment. They want that bank guarantee released. So what do? Let's get right into it. Okay, so let's put you directly in the hot seat. You're 3 years past practical completion. You've just walked the site and, yep, there they are. Still a few minor defects. Now the contractor's on the phone asking for their final security back. What's the call? Do you release it? I know it feels like a bit of a gray area, but your contract, believe it or not, makes the answer absolutely crystal clear. You see, the key to solving this whole puzzle is realizing that we're actually asking two totally separate questions here. First off, is the contractor even on the hook for these defects after all this time? And then, question number two, which is a whole different ballgame, what does the contract specifically say about the conditions for releasing that bank guarantee? Let's break them down, one by one. First up, let's talk about the contractor's liability. Does their responsibility for the work they did just, vanish into thin air after a certain amount of time passes? Let's unpack what the contract says about their duty beyond that initial deadline. So every AS4000 contract has this thing called a Defects Liability Period, or DLP. You know it well. It's usually that first year after completion where the superintendent is actively chasing up and managing any little issues that pop up. In our scenario, 3 years have passed, so yeah, this period is long gone. And here it is. This is the part so many people miss. The end of the DLP is not the end of the contractor's responsibility. Not even close. Their fundamental legal obligation to fix their own shoddy work continues well beyond that first year. And check it out, this timeline shows you the difference perfectly. You've got that 1-year defects liability period. Think of it as just an administrative window. But look beyond that, there's a much longer period of contractual and statutory liability that continues, often for 6, sometimes even 10 years, depending on your state's laws. So the answer to our first question? It's a definite yes. The contractor is still accountable. Okay, so that's settled. Now let's move on to the second, and you could argue the more critical question. When do you actually release that final bank guarantee? This isn't about what feels fair. It's about following a golden rule that's written right into your contract. And here it is, the exact wording from Subclause 5.5 of the AS4000. It says, security is released upon the expiration of the DLP or when all defects have been rectified, and then these 4 magic words, whichever is the later. Honestly, those 4 words, they're everything. So what this does is it creates a 2-part test, right? And both parts have to be checked off. Let's run our scenario through this logic. Has the defects liability period expired? Yep, 3 years ago. That's a yes. Okay, part 2. Have all the defects been rectified? Nope, that's why we're here. That's a no. And since the contract says whichever is the leader and the fixing hasn't happened yet, the condition for release has not been met. The answer is simple. You do not release the security. It's really that simple. That one little phrase, whichever is the later, is basically the lock on the gate. It's the mechanism the contract gives you to protect your position in exactly this kind of mess. Just knowing this phrase exists and, more importantly, what it means is your most powerful tool. Okay, so we've established the contractor is still liable, and we know we shouldn't release the security. So what's the next move? Well, the great thing is the contract doesn't just leave you hanging. It gives you a precise playbook for what you should do next. Here's your action plan, straight out of Clause 35.3. Step 1, you formally, in writing, direct the contractor to come back and fix the defects. Step 2, and this is important, you have to give them a reasonable amount of time to actually do it. Step 3, if they ghost you or just fail to act, you can then go and engage someone else to do the work properly. And the best part, step 4, the cost for all of that becomes a debt that you can claim directly from the contractor using that very security you've rightfully held on to. So when you boil all of this down, what's the single most important lesson to walk away with? It's actually a very simple but incredibly powerful principle that underpins this whole process. It's this: the job isn't done until it's all done. That bank guarantee isn't just tied to a date on the calendar, it's there to make sure the principal gets what they paid for. A project that is complete and free of defects, just like the contract promised. Until that happens, the deal isn't finished, period. Which, brings us to our final thought. So often, we see these hefty contracts get signed and then just filed away, collecting dust in a drawer. But as we've just seen, That document is your single most powerful tool for navigating these complex situations with total clarity. The answers are almost always in there. So the only real question left is, are you using it?